Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. So today I want to talk about who is the big winner in this war in the Middle East with Iran, between Iran, the United States, and Israel. And the big winner, the country that's benefiting the most out of all of this and center is Russia. Russia is the big winner here. And also last week, Trump just announced that he's going to ease sanction on Russian crude. I mean, Russia could never ask for a much better deal because once the U.S. and Israeli strikes on Iran began, the Strait of Hormuz instantly turned into the world's biggest choke point risks. A huge share of global oil and gas normally move through that narrow passageway. So every drone strike and missile warning translated into fear that tankers might be hit or blocked. The whole misconception is that Iran has to put like their Navy ships or they have to mine the Strait of Hormuz or anything, they have to put like mines in there or anything like that to stop ships from going through. That is not true. All they have to do is maybe hit one or two ships with a missile or a drone, and no one, and I mean no one, is going to want to go through there. And insurance costs for those ships just went sky high, and no one, basically that is only one insurance company, which is the Lloyd of London. I wish I just found out recently that every single ship that is out to sea, all the insurance for those ships are all insured in England and London specifically. And once that happens, they're not going to insure those ships, and so nothing moves. So you see, so Iran doesn't need a big navy. They don't need anything special to just shut down the Strait of Hormuz. They just shoot a few missiles at some ships, and the rest takes care of itself. Now, with the blockage, market reacted in a way that you'd expect. Brent crude jumped really hard, with prices are pushing towards $100 mark, and it's not coming down. It's not backing off. Gulf producers like Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, UAE saw exports disrupted or rerouted. So several million barrels a day of Middle Eastern supply effectively just got taken off the market, off the table, or maybe at least temporarily. I mean, for now, they're not, producing anything. I mean, if the war was to end right now, okay, if we just said, okay, truce, and it's going to take a few months to get everything back in order. It's like, if you stop in a moving train, it just doesn't go back to normal again. It's going to take time to reset everything, get everything started again, put things on ships and start going to the strait again. So it's not going to be a one, two, three type of thing. All right. So that's going to take some time. And that's also going to affect prices. It's going to be a mess. Okay. For ordinary people, for ordinary Americans, that just translates to higher gas prices. For countries that are big exporters of oil, this shows up as, a big windfall, a big cash cow, basically. Now, Russia was already cashing in before Trump's latest announcement. Russia was one of the biggest beneficiaries of this whole war, all right, because now they're the only one left standing. So now it's going to be United States, Iran. Iran, by the way, is still exporting oil, and then Russia. I mean, you have some other players like Nigeria and Angola and different places in Africa, but the big players, which were the Middle East, was Saudi Arabia. We've taken Venezuela off the list as well. There are only a few players left in the energy game, and Russia is one of the biggest, and so they are reaping all the benefits of this war right now. Right? That saying, if your enemies are making mistakes, just don't get in their way. So before this whole thing, Russia was heavily sanctioned. There was price caps after the Ukraine invasion that was squeezing Moscow's oil income. But higher global prices plus, rerouted trade flipped that whole dynamic on its head. Analysts estimate that since the war began, Russia has been pulling in roughly about $150 million a day in extra oil revenue, thanks to the price surge alone. In just like the first couple of weeks, that adds upward to over $1 billion in additional budget income, with some projection putting the monthly boost between $5 to $10 billion around that price range if these prices stay elevated. I think that not only these prices are going to stay elevated. I mean, the Brent crude oil was like 110 before the recent market manipulation. I mean, that price is, at one point it hit 120, then it comes back to 105. It's teetering above. So recently the markets prices of oil went down because Trump, lied about, he said, hey, I'm talking to Iran, we're negotiating, or Iran called me, they want to negotiate. Iran immediately came out and said, hey, this is nonsense. We're not talking to the United States. He's lying. And then immediately prices went back up again. Is hovering close to about $100 right now. And who knows, as the week goes on, it might, continue to rise even more. Okay, that's happening. All this stuff is happening right now as Russian export volumes are not at record highs. Fewer barrels, much better prices is exactly what Moscow wants under sanction, right? Because if you're the most heavily sanctioned country in the world and you're not turning on all your oil exports at once because we have very limited buyers. So what works best if you can't make up the volume, you want prices to be higher, which is exactly what's happening right now for Moscow because oil doesn't, Moscow, Russian oil doesn't rely on the Hormuz Strait. Barrels moving the Baltic and the Black Sea, Black Sea ports suddenly look more attractive to buyers trying to avoid the Gulf. India and China, which had already become major customers for Russian crude, now see those supplies as a safety valve while Middle Eastern exports are at risk. The whole reason Trump moved, he wanted to ease sanctions on the Russians to basically, say, hey, listen, signal to the markets, there's more oil coming. Everybody can buy from the Russians for now to basically try to stabilize oil prices. So his decision this week to ease sanctions on the Russians grab headlines. He's temporarily lifting some sanctions on Russian oil. The Treasury Department issues a 30-day waiver that lets countries buy Russian crude and petroleum products that are already loaded on ships at sea, essentially freeing up stranded cargoes that were blocked by sanction rules. The White House is selling this as a narrowly targeted short-term move to cool prices fueled by the Iran war. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent framed it as a way to increase global reach of existing supply and promote stability in energy markets, emphasizing that it only applies to oil already in transit and arguing that Russia wouldn't gain that much because most taxes are collected at the extraction point, not when the oil changes hands at sea. In practical terms, different estimates say that we're talking about on the order of about 100 to 130 million barrels of Russian oil that can now legally find buyers over the next month instead of sitting parked offshore. Trump's team clearly hope that letting those barrels hit the market would at least signal to traders that extra supply is coming and maybe take some heat out of these prices that's hovering above $100 or at $100 and above. Okay. Now, why is this still a net win for Moscow? Critics, including a lot of European officials and sanction experts, see it differently. They argue that in trying to tame prices, Washington is handing Russia another advantage on top of the Iran war windfall. People who've worked on sanction policies point out that even if the waiver is temporary and formally limited to oil already at sea, it chips away at the credibility and enforcement of the whole sanction regime. Some analysts quoted in the US and European outlets say outright that this risks effectively dismantling oil sanction on Russia if it gets extended or repeated. Well, I got news for you. This thing is going to get extended and it will be repeated. I mean, maybe Russia might increase oil production to, capture more market share and to make even more money and to plug in financial gaps caused by this war in Ukraine. Experts also note that easing restrictions help Russia sell the same barrels at prices, tightening his budget and indirectly supporting his war effort in Ukraine. I mean, that's basically, it's common sense, right? If Russia is, yeah, they're selling less, but now the prices are more, which is great for them. Okay. So put simply, if prices are up because of Iran and you suddenly make it easier for Russia to move its crude, the Kremlin is almost guaranteed to pocket more cash. Ironically, early markets reactions suggest that oil prices on the back of Trump's announcement anyway. Oil was already up 40% since the start of the war in Iran. And after an initial spike on the day of the waiver, prices mostly shrugged off the policy change and stayed near recent highs. I mean, I think, having some Russian oil out there is, it's a little helpful. It's helpful. It's helping, but it's not making a big dent. It's not dropping the price of oil below $100. And maybe Russia could do that, but why would they? They would continue to, pump the same amount of oil to keep the shortage, to keep the prices, going higher and keep escalating. Why would they want to print more oil and bail the US out and bail us out, right? Because the whole point of this war is the reason why Iran is doing this, the reason why they close the Strait of Hormuz is to cause financial pain to the global economy, specifically to the US dollar. All right. So you have the worst of both worlds. Limited visibility, limited visible relief at the pump, but clear extra flexibility and potential revenue for Moscow. The political and global blowback. The move has drawn sharp pushback in Europe, where leaders have spent 2 years trying to clamp down on Russian fuel income. EU officials have warned that easing sanctions like this fuels the war machine in Ukraine and undercuts the united front they're trying to maintain against Moscow. From their perspective, Washington is now prioritizing short term relief on oil prices over long term pressure on the Kremlin. I mean, it's like a rock in a hard place. Europe want US more involved because the Ukraine war is their baby. They want to continue to have this war against Russia. And at the same time, Israel is fighting Iran, and we're fighting besides Israel because Israel sees Iran as an existential threat. Europe sees Russia as an existential threat, and they want us over there to help them. Israel want us over there. South Korea is like, hey, guys, North Korea is shooting missiles over here. We feel threatened. We need the U.S. presence over there in the Pacific. Taiwan is like, hey guys, China is surrounding us. Japan, I mean, it's a mess. We cannot be fighting all these wars at the same time. We cannot be in three different places all at once. Something has to give. So inside the U.S., Trump and his team argue that they are acting out of necessity. Americans are staring at higher gas prices because of a war of choice, by the way, in Iran that the American people did not vote for. This is not what the American people wanted. And the administration is under pressure to show that it's doing something. Hey, listen, guys, we're on top of this. We're on it. We're gonna bring the prices down. We're gonna win on this war. They're saying all kind of things. The thing is that they point to the simultaneous release of oil from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve as proof that Russian barrels are just one piece of a broader effort to calm markets. And we're just we're just releasing a bunch of oil onto the market. But how long? How long can we do that for? Another month? Another 3 weeks? And then what? Well, oil prices may go up to 200, guys, or at least 150, because it hit 120 a few times and it came right back down. Okay, but you don't have to be a sanction expert to see the broader picture here. Russia was already making more money from oil thanks to the Iran conflict and the squeeze of on Gulf exports. Now, with a U.S. waiver that loosens restriction on its seaborne crude, it gets more room to move those barrels and potentially capture even higher prices, all while the war in Ukraine continues. In other words, a war in Iran has turned into a financial tailwind for Moscow, and Trump's decision to lift sanctions on some Russian oil, however temporary or targeted, they describe it only strengthens Moscow's position. So in other words, the sanction on Moscow has on Russia basically has officially failed. It did not work. Russia is now going to fill its coffers with just extra, the extra higher prices of oil, and the war in Ukraine is going to rage on for another year or two. So let me know what you guys think. Do you think that Russia is going to, fund this war a year or two because of this windfall of cash from the Middle East and this war in Iran? Or do you think this war in Iran will end soon and we're going to come to a negotiated settlement? Let me know what you guys think in the comment section. If you like this video, please like, share, subscribe, and I will see you soon.